Hello and welcome to the Footy Interchange. This is the podcast where we get right around the country and find out all the latest news, everything that is going on in each and every state, and we check in with those reporters that are on the ground and certainly know the market that they are living in as well. Adam Papalia with you alongside Will Schofield. I do a bit of work for 6PR, a bit of work for Fox Footy, and great to be joined by Scoey again today. Scoey, great to have you along.
Hello, Paps. Good to be with you, mate, for another Footy Interchange. It's going to be there's a fair bit going on in AFL land at the moment, and a little bit over here in the West as well. So good having a bit of a lens from over here.
Different weekend with over here in the West as we kick things off, with both teams actually having a win for the first time in quite some time. It is amazing how, and people feel this wherever you live across the country, if your team's winning, if the teams around you are winning, there's just a different feel, I reckon.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've done, you handle talkback a little bit more than I do, Paps, and you might have got a bit of a scope of how people have woken up this week. But, I mean, certainly we felt the other way when West Coast and Freo have been going poorly. I think Freo fans, I said this last night, I reckon they're stuck in purgatory. I reckon they'd rather just be really bad.
Yeah.
I'd rather than be really good, rather than just average and really bad one week and good the next. They'd almost rather be really bad, I think.
There's definitely a sense from a lot of Fremantle fans you talk to that they're almost hoping that things fall apart a little bit so they see change and things actually move rather than just sort of bobbling around. But that win on the weekend was an excellent win for the Dockers. And if they can produce that, and that's the big question, if they can produce that consistently, then they're right in the mix.
Yeah, I agree. So, that's really what the knock on them is, after St Kilda game or against the Collingwood game, is Freo need to perform consistently at that level. More questions are around the Sean Darcy, Luke Jackson combo, whether or not that works. I think we're at the stage now that that's never going to stop getting asked now. So I just don't see how you fix that. And maybe that's how the whole Luke Jackson's getting traded chat started in the first place. Because I don't think that's really shifted the needle from reality. I know there's been a lot of talk in papers and other outlets around what that looks like, but I don't know if that's really shifted at all. But what has is Sean Darcy's injured again, and Luke Jackson has played in the ruck as a solo ruck and played really well again. So that conversation continues to move there, and I don't really know how you fix it because I don't think Luke Jackson's really ever looked good as a forward, even though that's where they want to play him.
Not as a permanent forward. No. And it's what that balance is and how much time you can have Sean Darcy on the bench and manage him through a game as well. That is the part that we don't know enough about yet. And I think they kind of had to bring him back earlier in this year, didn't they? Because Luke Jackson was out. So Sean Darcy wasn't quite back at 100% clearly. I think when Sean Darcy is at his best, it's Fremantle are a much better team when both of them are in the side.
Yes.
But if he's not at his best and he's still working his way back to fitness, then they have struggled like we have seen over recent weeks.
Yeah. I think so. Like the injury stuff for Freo is an interesting one because their list, probably just isn't as deep as what we either thought or didn't think about it properly because they don't have a deep list. They don't have a lot of triggers to pull at selection table, which puts, it even further back on the list that's actually, out there each week. They need to be more consistent because they just don't have the levers that like a Collingwood does and rest their 5 best players. Can't do that. So it's just more pressure on the group to perform. But, that's good sides perform. So you can't make excuses because they don't have a deep list. They're not playing well and consistently. Like that's what you have to do at AFL level. And they haven't been able to do that. And I don't think they're out of the woods yet, but it's certainly a better performance on the weekend.
Do you think this season, more than some others, we're seeing the opportunity for poor teams or teams that aren't informed to just pull one out of the hat and beat those better teams?
Yeah.
I mean, tipping is so hard. I know your money's on the line in some other tipping competitions that you're in.
So $10 a tip.
You need to take it very seriously. But, what is going on when Melbourne go to Brisbane and knock off the Lions at the Gabba? The way the Eagles, I don't know, there was exceptional circumstances around that one as well, but the Eagles get their first win of the season against St Kilda. We weren't sure whether they were going to win a game for the whole year. We've seen upsets time and time again throughout this campaign where teams, if you're not quite on and the other team is, you're a very big chance of getting an upset.
Well, at least no one's picking Melbourne to beat Brisbane. There wouldn't have been a person in the country that did that.
You're all in the same spot.
So I would say if you're at AFL head office, which I know we're about to speak about, you'd think that's a good thing. That is a good thing, that sides that you don't expect to win. Like you don't want a one-sided competition that every time Brisbane plays at the Gabba they win, or every time Gold Coast plays in Darwin they win. You don't really want that. You want every side to feel like they can win any given week, and we're probably pretty close to that. Like, yeah, West Coast are probably the anomaly at the moment. They're not going to go into too many weeks this year thinking they can win, to be honest.
No, but are they now capable of pinching one?
Yes.
Here or there?
St Kilda was very poor on the weekend.
They were. And it's amazing the roller coaster we've seen from teams. Does that come down to a mindset thing? Is it a preparation thing? Like, are we seeing teams that come off a shorter break really struggling to compete?
No, absolutely not. No,
not buying into that?
I hate the away and home form stuff. I hate the travel stuff. I hate the fitness stuff. I don't think any of those... Look, they play a part, just not major ones. Mindset is the number one thing that differentiates teams and players.
Why does that change so much?
Because that's what footy is, mate. It's a mental game. It is... Every side in the AFL has 25 players or probably a few more that can play the game at a consistent level. But to actually do it at a consistent level, you need to have the mindset and everything needs to be correct and you need to be able to execute. And that is a mindset thing. Like structures and systems and coaching and, external pressure, they're all factors. But in the end, it comes down to whether or not you can prepare yourself and then execute your role on game day. It's why people get dropped. It's why people don't get selected in the first place, or maybe round one you don't get selected, but then, very quickly it becomes evident who can actually perform at a consistent level. That will never change. Like no matter how advanced we get with sports science, how advanced we get with coaching, how big the soft cap is, like it will never change that you need the mentality to be consistent at AFL level.
Someone clearly that's never played at the top level. I think it's the thing that intrigues me the most is how that form varies, and we see it in all sports across the world, and that's why we love it, because that's the variation. If you knew exactly what was going to happen before you went out there's no point even playing. But for you in your playing days and being in a team environment with that mentality, how early in a game can you tell if the team's on or off? Because sometimes you seem to know. I mean, like the Giants were poor on the weekend. They were right off from the very start. Saints were the same. Brisbane obviously weren't quite at the same level that they were at. Essendon were off straight away. So what are the sort of key indicators or key markers that you think, are you superstitious in that type of thing, or is it just a general feeling amongst the team?
No, intensity is a big thing. You can see that with your eyes. You have to have played to see that. Like you could watch the game on the weekend, St Kilda West Coast, and look at St Kilda and go, they're not on here.
So what do you measure by intensity? Can you explain that at all? Is there a metric you can put around that?
You can see it by the way players move, I think, and are in contests, like pressing up, standing the mark, the way they kick, the way they sort of, I guess, in and out of contests, like even stoppages or aerially. You can just see the difference in teams. And when you're in for a good game, when there's not really any difference, and you can be like, okay, well, this is... But when there's a significant difference, like both teams could be off and it'd still be a good game. Like North Melbourne, Richmond, I don't know if the intensity was there, but it was a close game.
Yeah.
St Kilda West Coast, like honestly, like I live streamed our good friend Dan in the crowd. Like I could tell within the first 10 minutes that was West Coast was going to win that game. Coaches like to tell you it might be the way you warm up or the way they are in the rooms or the chat in the rooms or the energy. But really, if people knew, people might know what it looks like to be on, but like the hard thing is how do you get a team there? And that's the challenge that forever sits.
And how hard is it to change that once you've started poorly?
Correct. That's the question. I know that's not an answer, correct? But like that's the question.
Yeah.
How hard is it to change it when you're in the moment? That's why sides struggle to come back from bad starts. Like that's why you have to start well, because you have to be very mentally strong to forget the fact that you're a long way down on the scoreboard, to commit to consistently playing your role and everyone doing that on the same page.
I think the roller coaster that we've seen with some teams and some games this year has been really interesting to follow. Was there anything in a game that you looked at, say first quarter or even in the warm-up or whatever, and you thought, if you saw that, you'd know, oh yeah, we're going to go okay?
Well, when we were playing well at West Coast, it was music and people screaming in in the race. Like we used to have your Mastons, your Crippses, your Shoeys, your not those guys. Like the extroverts, just screaming. Pat McKinney carrying on like a pork chop. Like the footy extroverts. Like if you got that energy early and the music was right, usually pretty good.
Sort of drag everybody else
Yes,
through.
correct.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's an intriguing thing, I think. There's the ups and downs in a team week to week, and a lot of them have been consistently inconsistent right throughout the year. We'll talk about it with Drew Jones as well, but AFL House, some meetings last night at a pub in Fitzroy, I think it was, some of the senior coaches. What's your read into what's happening there is the relationship seems to be a bit of frustration between some of the clubs and those at the top.
I mean, look, I don't know what the relationship is with AFL head office with people internally at clubs, but or players or umpires or anything like that. But there is an undeniable. I think like the best way to describe it is a misreading of the room, with what frustrations fans and media and people who analyse the game have with the game. There's specific decisions around umpiring. There is messaging from the AFL, and then the frustration at the way that messaging comes out of AFL head house. They're getting it right. Like they haven't got some stuff right. And again, just watching in, like the lack of accountability when they don't get it right, I think is frustrating for people. So God knows what they're talking to the Scott brothers about. Ideally late changes to Chris. Yeah, and I mean, Brad would know what he's doing, given he worked there. So he's a good crossover to have. But look, I just think overall they're not getting their messaging right. And this is a big thing with AFL clubs that don't do it well either. It creates frustration, whether it be injuries or incidents or players or access to coaches or the CEO or whatever. Like if you get that messaging wrong, then it doesn't matter what's actually happening. You just get frustrated fans and people. So that's what's happening with AFL Head House at the moment.
All right. If you've got any comments or questions for us, which will go into the question edition of the podcast each and every week, you can do that via email or via X is usually the best way to get in touch with either Scully and I on social media, or you can drop the comments in YouTube as well. Let's get stuck into it. This is the Footy Interchange. The Footy Interchange. Well, let's get straight to Victoria. Our man Drew Jones from Fox Sports and from GOAT Fantasy as well. We'll talk some fantasy news shortly, Drew, but there's a fair bit going on around AFL House, coaches meeting, which we've spoken about, as well with the AFL, and some continued calls for a mental health round in the AFL.
Hello, boys. Yeah, I think understandably after what happened over the weekend in tragic circumstances with Adam Selwood, that this was a discussion point which has been brought up before, but comes to the forefront again as we talk about past player welfare and the tragic situation that the Selwood family are going through at the moment. I mean, you speak to a lot of people and they'll say this is overdue. And if you speak to Wayne Swass, who is the founder of Pucker Up, which is a suicide prevention organisation, the 96 North Melbourne Premiership player, he actually went to the AFL 10 years ago asking for a mental health round to bring the conversation forward, to normalise the conversation. Remarkable to think that it's been now a decade. We've had 9 former AFLW and AFL players commit suicide in the last 6 years. So often when Wayne talks about this, he talks about it in terms of when Danny Frawley passed away, sort of past that point where that did create a lot of conversation, and Spud's game came about as a result of that, the Danny Frawley Centre, so St Kilda at the centre of a lot of good work here. So what the AFL have said to me, which I spoke about on AFL Tonight, is that their preference would be to champion the Spuds game into being one of the legacy fixtures within the AFL, and to channel their energy into that rather than having a specific themed round around men's mental health specifically, but just mental health in general. I know you've got some strong thoughts on this, Guy, and I want to give the floor to you in a moment, but here's what I would set out as what the AFL could do. So the weekend after Anzac round, we all have a bit of a breather. Then the next round, which is when Spud's game was this year, which is round 9, you have St Kilda do Spud's game either on a Thursday or Friday night at the MCG with a big Melbourne opponent. And then I would say have the Sydney Derby and the Q Clash across the Saturday and the Sunday. The reason being is that every single person involved in football is going to speak about mental health and men's mental health for the entirety of the build-up of this week. So a couple of big games in the northern states helps with the extra exposure for those games and bring those conversations even more to the forefront. And then you get every single senior coach, every senior player, captains speaking. And then we have to find a way to weave in the football and community element here. So I'm suggesting that AFL clubs make their facilities available during the week for free mental health checkups for fans and people involved with their football clubs. And that's just a way of starting some conversations, starting people on the process of speaking about what they're going through, and turn it into something that just floods the conversation for that week. That would be my blueprint for a mental health round in the AFL.
I love the work you've put into it, Drew, and I appreciate you actually highlighting it as well. I'd go further and probably not to dismiss your idea, but this wouldn't take a complete refresh of a round or a fixturing. You could put this together in 3 days, and I don't say that lightly, given I know what logistically you need to put this together, but. Get guys wearing an armband, get guys in blue socks, get something to signify it. Have a tagline such as for Men's Mental Health Week, check in on a mate. It really does not need a marketing company to go and spend 3 years on, or to have Wayne Swass and his team go to AFL 10 years ago to put this together. This could be put together for this weekend, seriously. And I'm dead serious about that. Male suicide kills over 6 men every day in this country. And it is something that is not spoken about enough. And brilliant that we're putting focus on Spud's game. That is brilliant. But to say that it's not a priority, make it around, that is a joke, complete joke. And it's another AFL head house. I would say error. So look, absolutely, it needs to be forefront of everyone's mind, and ideally, if more of us are speaking about it and requesting and coming up with plans like you just have, Drew, then we get something across the line with the AFL, because 10 years before, it's been on their table for 10 years and they've done nothing about it. That's basically what I think about it.
Yeah, it's a conversation that will continue on with you, Sco. I think there should be something done before the end of the year, and then move into something like you said, Drew, and put that whole thing into place around Spud's game into next year as well. We'll talk more about this at the end of the pod today, given everything that's happened over the last few days. But AFL House as well, Drew, the dinner last night in Fitzroy, some of the coaches catching up with Andrew Dillon, and just, is it peace talks or is it just a chance to catch up? What's going on?
Yeah, the Builders Arms, I believe, on Gertrude Street, which is a really nice establishment. Hopefully, chicken parmas.
Good steak. Good steak okay. on a Monday night.
Yes, I believe there is a drink special on Monday nights also. So
good
time to go. So what they've done is previously, I don't know if you remember, they used to all go to Gill's house. You bring a bottle of red wine. That was always subject to breaking down what type of wine coaches would bring along to Gill's place. What do they crack on the night? But that was for all the coaches on one night, which it's now been broken down into various meetings through the year with Andrew Dillon and some of his team, just to make sure that coaches sort of can be heard more in a smaller environment. So last night, Simon Goodwin, the Scott brothers were involved, and so the coaches are rowing the boat very strongly for the soft cap to be increased. And they're talking publicly about that's going to help with player development and welfare, gets better pay for assistant coaches, which they think is an area that they need improving. But there's always going to be something sort of behind the scenes that we don't know about that coaches are searching for. So Brad Scott, speaking today, said that it was the best meeting that he's ever had with AFL House. We can take him at his word, because he is generally critical of AFL House when the time calls for it. But ultimately, there's a number of issues like the severity of some of the suspensions at the tribunal, the sub rule. There's a few things on their minds that they would like tweaking. But it's in the AFL's best interest right now to be listening be good listeners, to be active listeners. And the fact that Brad has come out and said, it's the best meeting we've ever had, that's good for AFL PR. So I'm sure they were open ears, open hearts for the AFL coaches.
I've heard a lot of best evers this year. Umpiring's never been better. State of the game's never been better. It sounds like it's straight out of the AFL playbook. Who would have thought? Spare me, seriously. I would probably spend a little bit more time on Essendon not getting done by 100 points. James Hird linked to Essendon again. Speaking of Essendon, what's going on here, Drew?
Yeah, so, I don't know about the credibility of a statement saying that James Hird has interest in coaching the Bombers again. But it has been long thought of behind the scenes at the Bombers, and there are people who believe that there's the possibility that he could coach the club again, and Kevin Sheedy was rowing that boat really strongly, which is why he ended up leaving the board in the lead up to Brad Scott being given the job as head coach when Alistair Clarkson wasn't interested in taking over from Ben Rutten. So there's always been factions at Essendon, and something that Brad Scott said when he took over the job sort of in the lead up in negotiations was, I don't want that instability. I don't want to be undermined by people, that are involved with the football club. And so this is an example of that happening. So 97-point loss, and then the rumblings come out about Paul Little and James Hird. Brad Scott was really stoic on this today. And this is the old Essendon coming through. So if the losses continue to pile up, then more stuff like this will come out, and that's just the unfortunate reality of Essendon right now. Yeah,
it was a bad loss on the weekend. The Blues got a big game, of course, against the Giants. But the one I really want to talk to you about is the Dogs and the Cats. Bailey Smith, who's had an unbelievable year, been a bit of back and forth, and Bailey Smith just stoking the fire between his old club. This one's going to be huge.
Yeah, can't wait for Thursday night at GMHBA Stadium. So just a small flag from today is that Bailey Smith wasn't out there for Cats training. So Geelong have said, as they have said before about Bailey and other players, a modified program indoors. So my suspicion here is, off a short break, it is possible that he is doing very little this week. They're managing his recovery off the back of the ACL, but it's hard not to be suspicious at times about Geelong and the way they manage their lineup. So at the moment, I'm going to say, let's look forward to Thursday night and a stoush between Bailey Smith and his old teammates. And there is no love lost between some of them. And we saw a bit of that, with the Ballarat jibe and Marcus Bontempelli on the Sunday. But there's just a little flag. Is Bailey going to be good to go for the game? Because if he is, it's going to be fireworks.
Yeah, and it'll be a late out if he is pulled out, by the way. He will be named, I can guarantee you that. Drew, let's just finish off with fantasy, mate. Goat fantasy. Carnage, specifically in the forward line. Like, it's absolutely diabolical down there. What's going on?
Yeah, it's rough. So it sounds like punctured lung for Jack McRae. We're still waiting to hear exactly how long he'll be out, but certainly out this week with the Saints game against the Gold Coast under the lid. Then Jason Horne-Francis with the 4-week hamstring, another out, which is a very highly owned player. And then Finn Callaghan has had a really good last few weeks in the midfield as well. If you're like me and you've copped all 3 bullets, then it's a tough week at the trading table. But I've had a look around. So I think Kadeem Coleman, if you're looking for a bit of value in your defence, this is possibly the week to go. So he's priced in the 500s in AFL fantasy. The role looked good last week. He looked smooth and skillful, as he always does, off the back of the ACL. So you can do some DPP, get Coleman in. Then I reckon Nick Martin is the play. Richmond match up on Friday in Dreamtime at the G, and Essendon have the late round 16 bye, so you get as much value out of Nick Martin as possible. He's also available in defence and in the forward line. And then there's not really many rookies around at the moment to cash into. So I think a couple of moves sideways can get the job done. If you've got Callaghan, Isaac Heaney coming off a big game against the Blues, he's really underpriced, hasn't had as big a year as last year. Maybe he's one to take a flyer on. But it is a tough week with a lot of carnage flying around. But it creates opportunity. So get yourself up those rankings, make some good decisions.
You sound like a senior coach, Drew. Well done, mate. Thank you so much, as always.
Thank you, boys.
Drew Jones there with the latest out of Victoria. GOAT Fantasy News for all your fantasy news that you're chasing, as well, and of course from Fox Sports News as well. Well, let's head across to Queensland, to the Sunshine State, and check in with Tom Rockcliffe, 200 gamer in the AFL. Great part of the Footy Interchange. And we crossed him with a little bit different this week because the Brisbane Lions, certainly it was a massive upset with Melbourne getting over the line. It was broadcasting the footy at the time that this one was actually happening. So I'll put my hand up. I'll say I haven't seen a bit of it, but I was absolutely gobsmacked when I saw the score at about three-quarter time of the Eagles game. Tom Rockcliffe, welcome to you. What's happened to the Lions?
Yeah, well, I reckon I've been coming on here every week and saying that the Lions are in first or second gear and it's scary for the rest of the competition. When it clicks, they'll be near unstoppable, but it's certainly not clicking for them. They go down to Hobart, have a draw against North Melbourne, and then the underperforming D's get rolled on their home deck. So I think they need a circuit breaker. They were first quarter, they were outstanding, played some really exciting footy, taken on the corridor, looked up and about on their home deck. It was the Lions by how much, but Melbourne just found a way to grind back into the contest. And I think they're a bit hot and cold, Brisbane, at the moment. They're playing that sort of 20 minutes and been good enough in the past to put teams away in that short time period. But I think it's time now for Chris Fagan and his coaching staff to make a big selection call, just to ignite something under the belly of his team who potentially look like they've got a little bit comfortable within their own skin and not performing. And this is just an external point of view. Obviously, I'm not involved in the footy club or anything like that. And I'll probably sit back and go, who are you to say anything? We've been to the last two grand finals. We're sitting second on the ladder. But I think it needs to be a Charlie Cameron or a Cam Rayner that they leave out of the team, just to light the fire under the rest of the group and say, you know what, it's time now. We need to kick into gear here. That they haven't been performing all that well while still winning games of footy. But I think Cam Rayner's impact on the games, he's brilliant when he's up and about. He comes in, he bursts in, he can be a match winner in the space of 5 or 6 minutes. But he goes missing for long periods of time, and Charlie's been the same this year. His impact on the scoreboard's not there, and he's not contributing all that much around that. His defensive pressure. And the one thing that really was noticeable on the weekend, which you'd never say about Charlie Cameron, was he was fumbly inside 50. He was running over ground balls, which you see him take just cleanly week in, week out. So I think as a circuit breaker for the entirety of the group, not necessarily for the individual, those are two individuals. I'm sure there's more amongst that you could potentially drop, but it needs to be a big name to light the fire under the belly again and just let them recalibrate and get things going in the back half of the season.
Yeah, it's been interesting watching on. I mean, some would argue that, well, at least it's happening at the start of the year. Like, is it just a mentality, like a hunger thing? Like, it's not a premiership hangover, but, they've lost the hunger a bit?
Yeah, well, you could probably talk to that a lot more than what I could, Scully. I never got the privilege of playing in a grand final or anything like that. But, I mean, once you've probably been to the pinnacle, do you slip off, even if it's a couple of percent? We see how even the competition is now, that it only has to be 4 or 5% off your absolute best and you can get rolled. So I think they need a circuit breaker, because you look at their performances this year, that they're not setting the world on fire and they were coming from behind in a lot of games. So I think they just maybe a little circuit breaker before the bye, just drop one of those players and put everyone on notice and kick into gear in the back half of the year. They're still in a really sound position. This time last year, they're sitting 14th, 13th, 14th on the ladder. So I think they're in a sound position. But if they want to go back to back, I think a decision really needs to be made, and it's a tough call at selection for me.
I think they will have lost a bit of the hunger, but I reckon they just need a game against a good side. Like, that can be a circuit breaker just as much as selection. Like, so they've got Hawthorn this week, they play Essendon, and then they play Adelaide, GWS, Geelong. Like, they've got a big 5 weeks coming up. I'm sure there's a bye in there somewhere. That can be as much of a circuit breaker as performance. You're a premiership side. You're playing North Melbourne in Tasmania. Like, I don't know if you're hungry for anything down in Tassie, let alone, I just think, like, what are we doing here? So they need to play some good sides, which they have. So I'm probably not as critical as you, Tom, but to be honest, you'd know I wouldn't. Gold Coast, are we talking about side? Are we buying grand final tickets? Like, I feel like this is the team. We're good to go. Gold Coast Suns.
Well, it's a little bit like that. They've been impressive, aren't they? And effectively, if you even it out or gave them the game against Essendon, which we'd expect them to win on their home deck. They're on top of the ladder as we speak right now. So, yes, they're not there at the moment because they haven't played that game, but they've got St Kilda, Freo, Geelong and the Giants in the next 4 weeks. So I think we'll learn a lot more. You'd expect them to beat St Kilda after their performance against West Coast, although St Kilda are a bit up and down. Fremantle are a bit the same, but they've got obviously a tough road trip up to the Gold Coast. They've been to Sydney, which is the 2 longest trips, I think, for the Perth teams to go to Sydney and then to Queensland. So I think they should win their next 2, and then they've got the massive 2 games against Geelong and the Giants, and we'll really find out where they're at. But if they can pinch one of them, if they win 3 out of their next 4, I think they're certainly in that top 4 bracket, and they're going to be hard to knock out.
I think there's plenty of people behind the Suns hoping that they do well this year and at least finally make finals, which looks like it's happening now, but then to have a good year as well. Tom, great to chat to you as always, mate.
Thanks, Jess.
Tom Rockcliffe there with all the latest out of Queensland here on the Footy Interchange. The Footy Interchange as we head to South Australia. Sim Thomas-Wilson is with us from the Adelaide Advertiser and from Code Sports as well. Sim, been great to chat to you right the way through the season, but I feel like it's almost every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks, we are asking you the same question. Is the handover going to be fast-tracked between Ken Hinkley and Josh Carr as some of the results we've seen continue to mount?
Yeah, hey guys. Yep, it's we've had this conversation a fair bit. I think that result, the performance against Geelong, that was almost bad on another level in some ways. It looked like they're waving the white flag. You know, I think it's more around them actually dropping their heads a lot. But on yesterday, Tyson Goldsat, the defensive coach, actually said that the coaching staff themselves had like a frank conversations around if they still believed in the game plan and philosophy, which is quite interesting. They've got one more game for the mid-season bye, and I think I've been pretty steadfast that Port will see through Kent for the end of the season, but I'm starting to think there could be there's a world where they could just rip the cord and go, Josh, take over, even though I don't think he wants to.
Well, surely Ken's just the mouthpiece now, though. Like, surely they don't have Josh Carr there being an assistant coach coaching Ken's game plan. Like, that would just make that is literally a wasted year, given what the performance they're putting out. So you're telling me that their messaging is that Ken Hinkley is the man, and he's a man internally as well as externally. Surely he's just doing press conferences at this stage and not having much to do with game plan.
What they say is, and what people say there is that Ken's in charge this year. The game plan is he's big on the handball, the real handball-heavy game plan that they've been going. I'm trying to do as well, yeah, because when you say the mouthpiece and press conference, I remember 2020 on the Gold Coast when you had Essendon, you had John Worsfold fronting the media after games, and Ben Rutten was running the team, and that kind of weird thing where he's watching on, he's just asking John Worsfold questions about a game plan that when he wasn't coaching, pretty much. So it's a weird situation. Like, somebody did say to me, if they didn't announce the succession plan already, imagine what would be going on. Everyone would be calling for Ken's head. So there is some certainty, but so far the performances are just indicating that something's not right there.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it should have the opportunity to go through to the point and try to change it and get to the point where they can make finals. If it gets to that point where they can't, then clearly I reckon the handover needs to happen there.
They're not making finals.
Well, no, probably not. But you wait till you get to that point
literally, right,
where their season might be done.
West Coast can still make finals mathematically.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Right,
but,
okay.
It deserves the opportunity, given that he's been there, to try and right the ship over the next few weeks.
He's had it, though. He's had the opportunity.
If that doesn't happen, then there's no point going on for the rest of the year.
Too level-headed, you are, Papalia.
Still give him the chance to get there, and once you can't, then there's no point sticking around after that, I would think. Okay. The Crows, Sim, as we get sidetracked talking between ourselves. Good game against the Pies on the weekend. They had their chances. Probably just gave them a bit too much of a head start.
Yeah, they didn't lose. One of those losses, I guess, where they didn't lose any fans or anything. Like, Crows probably should play finals, but it's probably one of those results where you look at, when they get there, are they going to have much of an impact? Like, Collingwood just know how to win, and the Crows probably just aren't at that level of how to win those really big games, just those little moments. Like, Crows go away for too many free kicks or 50-metre penalties, and then when you see Isaac Rankin kick, what is it, like 2 out on the full or something like that, some of his kicking was quite, I guess at that moment, maybe they're just a tiny bit off. Like, they're probably going to get to an elimination final, maybe win an elimination final, but they're probably not a prelim final team at the moment.
I mean, Collingwood's just done that to two sides, haven't they? Freo, they did the week before exactly the same way, less inside 50s, found a way to win in a game that, most other teams wouldn't have. So I wouldn't hang your head too low if you're a Crows fan, but I agree with you, Sim.
How filthy are the Crows fans? There's a couple of dodgy calls through the game. They feel like the league's out to get them.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the Crows fans' favourite sports, saying they were robbed by the league. It's you always can bring out that guy that guy from years ago. It's always a fun one to bring out. But yeah, there's just a couple of things they probably didn't get right. I mean, did they go in too tall? Even though Collingwood somehow were without Darcy Moore, and the Crows couldn't make a tall forward line work. So especially in the wet, we knew it was going to rain. So yeah, maybe they'd have their time again if they on that one.
Brilliant stuff, Sim. We'll watch this space on the Power. Of course, they're coming across here to the West on Saturday night, which will be an interesting one. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Sim Thomas-Wilson there with all the latest out of South Australia. The Footy Interchange as we get the injury update now with Steve Gravina from Frontrunner Physiotherapy, of course, a former physio in the AFL, and he joins us right now. Steve, great to have a chat to you, mate. I know you would have been watching on with interest on the weekend because there was one game in particular where I don't think anyone could believe it. There were so many injuries happening in the first quarter.
Yeah, the Cats power game over in Adelaide was pure carnage in that first quarter. Every medical team's worst nightmare to have guys dropping like flies so early. And then it's on the strength conditioning guys to try to manage the rest of that team through that game. So, for both sides and big injuries, Horn Francis, unfortunately, has done a pretty good job of his hamstring. The reports are that he was probably nursing it leading into that game and didn't train a lot during the week. So they might have rolled the dice with that, and it didn't last long. So the messaging's been a month out, which... it's a reasonable grade hammy, unfortunately for him. Lockie Jones seems like, the more severe one out of the power, and they're sort of already talking about 8 weeks. So, likely tendon involvement, possibly not worse enough to warrant surgical intervention, but still one that is going to take some time. And then on the other side, unfortunately, Paddy Dangerfield, which, he's been a revelation this year as a veteran, being such a high impact player. But this is always the challenge of managing those guys as fatigue starts to set in this far into the year. So a little hamstring tweak, I don't think it's too bad, but they really have to nurse him. And fortunately for both clubs, but for Paddy especially, there's a bye coming up. So I'm sure they'll utilise that and give him probably the extra week and then build up beyond. But, 3 to 4 weeks for Paddy as well. Unfortunately for both sides, the game was, played in pretty cool conditions, which possibly played a role, but a couple of them might have been, carrying some concerns prior.
You've been out there when that's all been going on in games before. What's it like out there as a physio? And there's just player going down after player, and you probably got the coaches screaming at you saying, can they come back on or not? What's happening?
Yeah, it's chaotic. You've usually got 2 doctors and 2 physios working the game, as well as some trainers who might also be, qualified physios. So it becomes a bit of a divide and conquer situation where you're starting to prioritise, the more severe injuries that need the attention from the medical staff versus the physios that might be able to look at the soft tissue injuries. But, if you've got multiple that are all happening at once, it gets pretty tense. And then, it goes into a risk mitigation situation when you're trying to manage other guys who might be on restricted minutes, who might be carrying other injuries, try to then shuffle the magnets a bit to see who you can nurse through or who you just have to, send out to be the sacrificial lamb, so to speak.
It'd always be a terrible feeling when you've, like Horn Francis, for instance, and you've tried to manage him during the week and he's got a hamstring injury and then the first quarter his hammy goes. Like, as a medical department, you must think, like, oh, geez, what have we got that wrong? Maybe?
Yep. Yeah, well, absolutely. Like we've spoken before, you generally go through a pretty lengthy calculated risk analysis with your medical team, and then that's carried up to match committee, where a lot of factors go in: the severity of the injury or potential injury that you might be carrying, and the evidence on scans, how they're performing on the track, their track record with carrying niggles, how important the game is. Are you travelling? Are you coming off a shortened break? Are you going into a shortened break? All these things go into it. And then you make your decision and, at the end of the day, everyone's on board. And so, they don't tend to point too many fingers generally because it's a collective decision. But, you feel pretty average if you get it wrong.
Yeah, correct. Jeremy McGovern, West Coast, have come out at the start of this week and some different messaging around his concussion issues.
Yeah, a bit of a concern. So, typically that you serve that 2-week mandatory period off after a concussion, go through the protocols, tick off the boxes, and then you're ready to go. Unfortunately, you've got to read between the lines now that he hasn't been able to become symptom-free for one. And given his history and track record, there's a concern, I guess, that this might be something which plays out a little bit longer. So from what I understand, it's gone into the hands of an AFL committee who's been set up to look after these special cases. So Jeremy's background of a few different head knocks along the way, plus the potential of persisting symptoms now after a few weeks post-concussion, will go into a panel of specialists, so neurologists from around the country who have a special interest in this field, basically get together and take each case on its merits and make some decisions around, what the likely path is for Jeremy's management in the short term and long term. So, a little bit to play out.
It's not something that we have really heard about, AFL concussion panels being involved at this time of the year. So I find that interesting. It's not really something
that's happened with a few
the last
players.
couple, I think Paddy McCartan was probably one of the more famous ones where it was basically told to give it up after seeing a couple of specialists. Dan Venables was another one that we've had some experience with. So, it's becoming more common, and I think they're taking the lead from a few of the other codes around the world to have some independent medical advice come in to not that there would be emotional bias with the medical team, but just to have a fresh set of eyes and perspective on the situation to give an unbiased call.
Jack McRae, punctured lung.
Yeah, it wasn't really noticed post-game immediately, but the docs have kept him in Perth, and the suspicion was a fracture in the spine or a rib, and it's subsequently come out that there was a punctured lung, which basically impacts your ability to fly. Typically, the change in pressure when you're in the air can impact lung function if you've got an injury like this. So they hold him over in hospital and observe, make sure he's okay and stable, and it's not life-threatening, which I don't think it would be. But he needs a few days to let everything settle down before they can get him across and he's safe to fly. There's been cases where players have had to drive back either east or west after injuries like this, which can be a bit frustrating for the players especially. But usually, it's more the rib fracture that you have to manage after that as opposed to the lung. The lung generally, will sort itself out. And once pain settles down, it's managing the rib.
I'm pretty sure that's what Gov did last year for Simo. Hey, mate, before we let you go, I know you worked really closely with Sellers in your time here in Perth, and you were helping him out with his half marathon that he's due to run. He was due to run this weekend coming. Zero to Hero is the charity that he was doing that for, and I know you were working pretty closely with him, so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to sort of sound out on that if you wanted to, mate.
Absolutely heartbroken, firstly, and truly shocked at what happened on the weekend. He was a mate, and we worked together in recent time as well, so had a little bit of insight into, I guess, what he was going through. Obviously sending my love out to all of the Selwood family, Fee and the kids especially, who I did know well. I can't even begin to process how tough that may be, having kids of my own. So, just all the very best to everyone, and it's a good reminder that everyone should be looking out for each other and continuing to be, open and trying to help make sure that everyone is looked after and cared for and has the opportunity to talk to people when they need to.
Well spoken, mate.
Really
Good
well
man.
said, mate. And you make sure you look after yourself as well. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Steve Gravina there from Frontrunner Physiotherapy. We'll talk a little bit more about Adam Selwood coming up shortly on the pod as well. The Footy Interchange as we look here to the west where we are based. And Eliza Riley, of course, from Code Sports joins us right now, one of the best newsbreakers in the business. Everything covered in WA, of course. And Eliza, let's start with Fremantle. Great win for them on the weekend. They seem to be a little bit back on track now, but there's still some question marks about the best fit for a few of the players in their side.
Yeah, hey guys. The coaches' votes are out, and two players I immediately zoned in on are Shea Bolton and Luke Jackson, because the numbers are in from Champion Data, and I can tell you that those two are the number one ranked players in the competition, Bolton being a midfielder if you discount his minutes up forward. He is the number one midfielder in the competition in the AFL this season, if you strictly just count his midfield minutes. And Jackson is the same. He's the number one rated ruckman in the competition if you're purely counting his minutes in the ruck. So two players who've been flung around a bit this year, but I think the pathway forward for both of those is clear. Bolton obviously had the 10 coaches' votes, 3 goals, most influential player on the ground. And in the first 5 weeks of the season, he was used 26% of the time in the middle. And in his last 5, that has now bumped up to 51%, and Fremantle are starting to reap the rewards of that. And Jackson obviously is an even bigger conversation about how he and Sean Darcy fit into the side. I know it's been done to death already this week, but it is such a generally interesting proposition for that football club. They're both, I guess, best 22 members in pretty much any other side in the AFL, but how they get them to work together. Is it Sean Darcy playing more forward? Is it Sean Darcy going back to the waffle and, finding form to the point where he is pushing for that number one ruck mantle again? Because I think the last few weeks have proven that the Dockers have had a change in their thinking, and they now believe that Jackson is their number one.
Wow, that is very interesting, given that for 4 years they've been saying they want him as a forward, and those numbers are extraordinary. Great job, Eliza. I always used to sit in team meetings, and when numbers were put out, whether it be whatever it was the coaches were trying to you can take numbers anyway. So if I get devil's advocate those numbers, I reckon there's a few midfielders in the comp going, yeah, if I only had to play in the midfield 26% of the time, I'd be the number one midfielder in the comp too. But they're still very, very good numbers, and you can see by the eye that they're going well. It's not like we're making this up. I know you wouldn't be either, but it's like you can see Shea as a midfielder. That's who they drafted. That's who they got. All right, let's go to West Coast. Someone who was also recruited to the footy club this year was Liam Baker. For what they paid for him, is Liam Baker starting to live up to that hefty price tag?
Yes, obviously great win for West Coast against St Kilda, but I do want to pose this hypothetical. If you're a West Coast list management team with the benefit of hindsight, would you rather keep pick 3 and draft Sid Draper, who's obviously at Adelaide right now, or trade it and get Baker, Gross, Davis and Allen as they have? I think as much as they were slammed at the time for trading away pick 3 and potentially a generational midfielder, I think we're starting to see exactly what Liam Baker was brought to the football club to do. He's one of the worst kicks in the AFL, apparently, according to Champion Data. But he makes up for that with his chaos, his ability to smother. He literally flew through the air like Superman and scored the ball vertical to the ground on the weekend. It's that desperation which the Eagles have been so desperately lacking, and that leadership he has brought in absolute spades. And, he doesn't have to be the most clean user by foot on the team to have an impact. And I think as much as West Coast were obviously slammed at the time, I think we're really starting to see that the role that Liam Baker plays in this team and what he's going to be able to do for this club going forward.
It looks like they've effectively got a future captain for pick 3. So if you said that to anyone for anything, probably similar to the Josh Kennedy trade for West Coast a long time ago. If you look back at that, and they trade away Chris Judd, I understand he's a good player, but they got Josh Kennedy, Coleman medal winner, multiple Australian. That's what they get for that. But if I can answer your hypothetical question, I'd actually take Sid Draper, Eliza, and it's not because I think he's a better player. my youngest son is named Sid, and I reckon he would have been his favourite player, so I would have taken Sid Draper if I could have.
Could have locked them in as Eagles supporters rather than
Correct.
Freo fans or whoever else. Eliza, the last one, of course, the really sad news across the weekend around Adam Selwood, but he was raising some money for charity and Zero to Hero. The charity is going to continue with that.
Yeah, obviously tragic news over the weekend, and all our thoughts go out to the Selwood family and his wife and his kids. But if there was one tiny silver lining, it's that his campaign, he was obviously planning to run the HBF run for a reason this Sunday and complete that half marathon. His donations have more than doubled since his tragic passing on Saturday morning, and I spoke to the CEO of that charity, Zero to Hero, yesterday, Ashley Harrison. Definitely get around them if you can. And there are plans, and it is very early stages. She did stress this, but with such a significant amount of money heading that charity's way, she sort of spoke to the idea of potentially working with the Selwood family, and that would be a guarantee to have them involved in the design of this, and potentially the West Coast Eagles Football Club as well, about a long-term legacy for Adam and ensuring that legacy is realised. And what that looks like, we're not exactly sure. It could be maybe a scholarship for a young footballer coming through the system. It could be money towards a mental health cause specifically aimed at young men and supporting them. We're not, there's a lot to play out here, but there is a significant groundswell to ensure that his legacy is realised. And, they've gone from having around 80 people running in support of this charity this weekend, and they've just been inundated with people saying, I want to do this for Adam. What can I do to help? How can I get around this such important cause? So I think by the sounds of it, they're going to have some marquees at the finish line and have some counsellors and psychologists available to support runners, because it will be quite an emotional day. And you just implore anyone who has the means to reach out and give to this cause and other causes supporting suicide, because it is such a big issue in our society, and this has rocked the football community, but the community at large.
Yeah, really well said, Eliza. And I don't think I'm speaking too far out of school, but I know a number of Adam's former teammates are planning on running the run that he was going to put together. I know there were some messages floating around over the last couple of days to get the boys to basically finish the run for him. So, that sort of stuff, starts to make you a bit emotional around thinking about that, but very happy and like you said, Eliza, just a small silver lining that you might be able to make a difference going forward, but not much you can do about the past.
Certainly. Eliza, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Eliza Riley there with the latest in the West. I was going to talk to you about it at the end of the show, Scully, but seeing as we're talking about it now,
yeah, I think so.
With Eliza, how are you going, mate? That's all I want to check in on. Is obviously been a really tough day for you and a lot of your friends.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking me, and I've had sort of a number of media commitments over the last few days, and a similar question, which is absolutely fair enough to ask. But my initial reaction is it's not. Yeah, I just it's certainly not about me, and I've been sad and upset about losing a mate, but in the end, I think the real people we need to think about is family and really close friends and family. Eliza spoke so well then. His parents, Marie and Bryce, his brothers Joel and Scott, his wife Fee, his children. These are the people that ultimately and. As absolutely brutal as it is, grief stays with you for a long time. I've spoken on this program and lots of others around my experiences with that. I lost a brother 2 years ago now, Jace, to cancer, and different type of grief, but it's all the same really. And yeah, I really love when we sort of, when people can get behind different causes to try and think about doing something to, be proactive or preventative or whatever it needs to be. That's why I guess the men's mental health round resonates with me a lot. And I just, again, being brutally honest about it, I just think it's just a bunch of bullshit that people say that you can't make it a priority and it can't happen without putting together different groups of people to do this and that. We're going to make sure we get it right. No, you just need to have a conversation, and you just need it to be a topic of something for men in this country. Like it really doesn't have to be, every box ticked the first time around. Like you think about Slide for MMD, which I don't think is too far away, the big freeze.
Yep, on the King's
like the
birthday.
first time they did that, I reckon it was like a, kid's baby slide, and it went into a bucket of water, or it might have been a bucket of water being put over someone's head. And now look at what that's grown into. We're 7-8 years into that. Like that's what this needs to be. It doesn't have to be exactly right first time around. It just needs to start. And it needs to start for men in this country. And I was extremely close to Adam as a player. He taught me a lot as a person, about leadership, about being a good person, about being consistent. Like all that stuff I said at the top of the show around consistency and mental strength as a player. That's what Adam Selwood had. He was a teammate in which you could rely upon no matter how hard the game was. So if you talk about how do you measure it, how do you do it from a football sense, like Adam Selwood, Troy Selwood, Joel Scott, like that, they were all very consistent players. And I know that's absolute trivial speaking about football in that sense, but tough time for his family. Everyone's doing their best to support everyone close to him. I know the Selwood family immediate ones are over here now in Perth, and we'll probably get together as a footy club this week as well, and continue to support each other in this time.
It's good to hear that you've got that support and you'll all get together and support each other through that. I think this one certainly, and I didn't know Adam really at all, but I think just getting a feel from the fans of his and those on the periphery as well, it's kind of hit the wider footy community a lot just because of clearly the tragic circumstances around it. But as you said, the flow-on effect from that is people have the conversation and they talk to each other and they support each other. So hopefully in tragic circumstances there can be some positive messaging out of it. And I'm completely in agreement with you. You cannot wait on this stuff. You need to get to action and just do it.
Yeah. Sort of reflect on what footy's about really in moments like this. And I've actually really struggled doing content this week. It just feels so irrelevant, and it's no disrespect to our audience. I've spoken about it on every show I've done that you just sort of, you're speaking about footy. It's like
I was fully not expecting you to be here today.
No,
like the show if you needed it to be, but in these times you need to look after yourself.
Yeah, and it's less about looking after myself, but it's just very relevant that we get quite caught up and very very carried away with our own egos and our own opinions and what we've got to say about this and that. But in the end, footy is actually about community and connection, and that's what this podcast provides people. Like, people listen, and we've got an audience here that listen to what we have to say. But in the end, it's actually about connection and community. So that's why Adam Selwood and Troy Selwood's loss has touched so many people, is because their family is connected by football to so many. Like, you speak about just my own. So I played with Adam probably about 100 games in my career. I was on the AFLPA with him. He was the delegate. I was the vice delegate at West Coast. Had lots of different things around football trips and post-career and business and all that sort of stuff. His twin Troy, I felt like I knew Troy because I knew Adam. His brother Joel, I was drafted in the same year as Joel. He moved across the road from my parents' house. So for the first 2 years, he was with Tom Hawkins across the road from my house in Geelong. So I saw him every time I ever went home. I saw Joel Selwood. His brother Scott was the year after me. I lived with Scott for 3 years. My mum and Bryce and Marie, mum would come to the footy over here with dad. When dad passed away, Bryce and Marie would bring mum here to West Coast. They would drive her to the airport. They would travel. Like, we are so connected. And that story is times 10,000, like more. There is just so many people that the Selwoods have touched, but it's actually about the community and the connection. So that's why a loss like this in circumstances, which is suicide, right? And I know these are brutal ways to speak about it, but I just don't know any other way. That's why it is so touching and so emotional, and it affects so many people, and it shows how important that speaking to people is, and just asking people how you are. And even if you don't know someone's not going well, like literally just being like, "Hey mate, how are you?" Like not in a "Oh, geez, I'm really worried about you," but Paps, how you going? Like, as silly as that seems, like That's what about all this is about. And to reiterate and double down on a men's mental health round, that needs to happen. It's not a question anymore. You hear the numbers. Was it 9 former players have taken their lives in the last 6 years?
Yeah.
Mate, how many more? How many more do we need? Like that's 9 too many.
Yeah.
You need something before one goes.
Yeah, I agree with you. It needs to happen, and the conversation around it needs to happen more so. I know just personally for me, over the last couple of months with more of these stories coming out, I've made a point of trying to ring people that I don't chat to all that often and just try and have a conversation or just organise a dinner or a catch-up at the pub when everyone's busy and it's hard and everyone struggles to find that time, but it is really important. And the conversation piece we're talking around, it's not that long ago, you weren't actually allowed to talk about suicide in the media. So if someone had taken their life in the news, you weren't allowed to say that. You weren't allowed to have that conversation because they were worried about people doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But that has been a significant shift in the last couple of years where it is something that is talked about a lot more openly, and it's only needs to happen more, I think, as people address it more.
Yeah. Look, I'm not a mental health expert, and neither is Paps, and that's important to mention.
Absolutely.
I've done quite a few of these mental health chats out in public. My first year out of footy, I did about 3 months of mental health chats and my own mental health. So it's important to say we're not experts, but in the same breath, I would happily pick up the phone, email, talk to anyone who listens to this podcast, and I'm not. That's not a blank offering. There are people that you don't even know. You don't know me, Will. You don't know Paps, but you feel like you do. If you feel like talking to us about something would help, I guarantee you'll say the same thing. Hey, I'm all ears. So don't ever feel like you're alone. If you do feel like you're struggling, we've got in the description below different resources you can use, which are professionals. But from a person-to-person point of view, if you're struggling, reach out. Honestly, feel free to hit me up on Instagram, email me via any of our emails. I literally monitor everything.
And people, I think, are a lot more understanding these days of people reaching out. Will only, in 99.99% of cases, be there to help and support. So if you are struggling, if there's anything that you want to talk to someone about, you can talk to the professionals as well. Lifeline 131114. I know Scully hates it when I read out phone numbers in different ways. 13 11 14, if that helps, or you can text them on 0477 13 11 14, or you can check out their website at Lifeline Australia as well. But it's an important conversation to have. It's an important conversation that we'll continue to have and people will speak more of. And hopefully, the more that we do, the more that it can make a difference, mate. But we are here for you as well. I know you're trying to downplay it a little bit with what you're going through at the moment. But, we're here for you to reach out as well if you want to go and grab a beer.
Good man. Thanks, mate.
The Footy Interchange, delving into some different spaces today. Well, a tough way to finish up the Footy Interchange today, but we really appreciate your company and joining in the conversation with us right throughout the show as well. Scoey, looking ahead, of course, the Footy Interchange Exchange will be coming out, which is where we take all the listeners' questions and chat through that as well. And you're always the best man to tell us exactly how to do that.
Exactly right. You can go on to backchatpodcast.com.au, click on contribute, or there's a sign that says sign up as a patron. Sign up as a Patreon. No, sign up as a patron on Patreon to BackChat, and you will have the content coming up on the Footy Interchange Exchange at your doorstep. We will be taking it off public forums in 2 weeks. So we're just giving you a little taste of what's going to be put up behind a paywall, and I'm not going to try and hide that's what's happening. That's what's happening. It's going to be for our VIP members. You'll have opportunity to ask questions and have them answered by Paps and I. You get first release content, ad-free content, discounts on our existing sponsors. And you know what? We even chuck in some giveaways every now and then. If I got a couple of spare Eagles tickets lying around, I usually chuck them in Patreon as a bit of a bonus. So if you want to sign up to that, it costs you $10 a month, so $2.50 a week. I don't know what coffee prices are right now, but it's more than $2.50.
It is definitely brilliant stuff, Scully. So we want people's questions. We want the interactions. Going pretty well, the question segment. People enjoying that. And it's the place where you get to set the agenda on what we talk about. We've always got our own ideas, but it's always good to get a bit of a sense of what the audience want to talk about most of all. So make sure you send those through. And if you can like and subscribe and share this podcast around as well, we're keen to keep it going and keep it growing as well. Scully, thank you for you to come in today and be part of the show in tough times, but been great to have you here.
Yep, been good to be here, mate. Thanks for chatting.
It certainly has been. This has been the Footy Interchange.